Hi, everyone. As you enter in, we're just going to give a moment for people to get logged on and get settled. If we were together in person, you'd be greeting the people you knew, maybe doing high fives or hugs if it were pre-COVID. But just take a moment, make yourself comfortable, and we'll let people get signed on, and then we'll get started. Okay, we begin today by acknowledging that here in Salt Lake City, we are located on land which is named for the Ute tribe and is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. We recognize and respect the enduring relationship that exists between many Indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. Additionally, we are utilizing the technology of Zoom, which is headquartered in San Jose, California, on the traditional lands of the Ohlone peoples. We pay our respects to the current and past elders of all these peoples for their continued stewardship of our lands. We also must acknowledge that the prosperity of what we call the United States has depended on the labor of enslaved peoples. Rather than simply speak these words, we encourage all of us to consider donating to organizations like the ACLU, Black Lives Matter, Campaign Zero, and the NAACP. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brooke Horsch, and I am a middle-aged white woman with silver hair. I have on some dangly earrings and a gray and black sweater, and I'm in my home office with a small carving of Utah's delicate arch in the background, a very well-known landscape feature here in Utah. I'm so excited you're all here with us today for the convening of our 6th session in the Artist Elevated Discussing Equity and Creativity in the Mountain West series. This particular program and series was inspired by a brilliant group of people who came together to do some collaborative work and response. That group refers to themselves as Creating New Futures. And it was a national conversation led by dance artists of color from across the country. And as we witnessed those conversations, we realized we both needed to expand it to include other disciplines beyond dance, and also contract the conversation to be more specific to our region, the Mountain West. You can find the past sessions in this series, which were recorded on the website for Utah Presents Artist Elevated programming. And this session is also being recorded. So if you know of folks who would enjoy watching this, who maybe want to share it with their communities, constituencies, students, that recording will be posted shortly after today, and you'll be able to access it there. We'd also love for you to join us for future sessions. We have 2 more sessions coming up later this spring, and that information will be on the website soon. Those sessions are going to turn away from our artists and towards our gatekeepers, and will involve presenters, curators, funders, and critics. I'd like to thank our key partners on this series, which are the Utah Division of Arts and Museums, the College of Fine Arts here at the University of Utah, and the Salt Lake City Arts Council, as well as Utah Humanities. All of those partners helped us make this programming happen, and they were particularly instrumental in valuing the artists involved by helping us to pay them for their participation, time, and labor. And speaking of the artists involved, we are heartbroken to share that we have recently lost a panelist and artist who participated in an earlier session, Courtney Isaiah Smith. Courtney was an amazing musician. He was a member of our University of Utah School of Music family and alum, and a beloved member of the arts community here in Salt Lake. So in this moment, we're sending all of our support out into the universe for Courtney's family and friends so that they can continue to carry his amazing creative spirit and passion for music with them. Okay. Now for a few Zoom logistics, and then I'm going to stop talking and we'll get to all these amazing artists. Today's session will start with introductions, and then we'll include a conversation led by our moderator. For the last part of the session, we will share your questions for our moderator and the panelists. So please feel free to put those questions in the Q&A section at any time. If this is your first time really using Zoom in a webinar format, the Q&A is right next to the chat button. It's down on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. And if you want the question directed to a particular panelist, just let us know that when you post it. Also, feel free to post positive affirmations in the chat. One of the hardest parts about not being together in person is that we can't hear you when you are like, yeah, that's great, or you applaud. So feel free to put those affirmations in the chat for all of our great people here on this session with us today. And then again, this is being recorded. So you can check back for that recording later on. So I'm now very pleased to introduce our moderator, Dr. Elena Stromberg, an associate professor in the Department of Art and Art History here at the University of Utah. Elena specializes in modern and contemporary Latin American visual culture with a specific focus on Brazil and the US-Mexico border region, which you can read more about in her book, Art Systems, Brazil in the 1970s. Elena, thank you so much for joining us today and moderating. The time is yours.
Thank you so much, Brooke and Darby, for organizing this panel and in a very kind of timely moment. And thanks to the artists for being here and kind of brightening up a cold day. So I thought that we could just kind of jump right in and start up with maybe a brief introduction about you and your work, and maybe some of you would want to share an image of your work through screen sharing. So I thought I would just go in the order of my screen, which is probably not the order of your screen, and I'll just call on you unless there is, some issue. But I thought I would start with Jian, if that's okay. Yeah, so just, maybe 2 to 3 minutes where you talk about something about you and something about your work. And then we have, an image to sort of understand a little bit about your forms and the visuals of your work. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Elena, for introduction. My name is Jian Li Lodge. I am Korean-born, Salt Lake City, Utah-based artist, middle-aged Asian woman who is average size of height and weight, shoulder length, dark hair, and like to wear weird things, but not today. I'm wearing the khaki overall. I make paintings, drawings, installation, and public art. I'm interested in identity in flux, especially in globalized, shrinking world under the influence of social media. And I guess that would generally explain my looks and where I am. And I have this puppy sleeping behind me that is just a year-old lab who is 50 pounds. Name is Elsa L. I do paintings and drawings and the installation and recent work, especially I moved to Utah about 3-4 years ago from New York after living in New York for like 12 years, that I started to did the research of what kind of thing is around here and how I can describe myself in the context of as a transplant, or while I'm continuing the theme of the identity in flux as a woman, Asian, and being a mother and aging person, and maybe there's some more. I found this character, I made this character which is called Waterman, that is in moving, like half body and half is moving water in turmoil, that using a metaphorical of meaning of the shifting shapes. And so as you can see, this is the most recent drawing I did in the Waterman Falling. Is about 48 by 36 acrylic on canvas. And I also recently, right before pandemic, I completed a public art in New York in Queens Elementary School. This is about 17 by 38 feet mural called The Arrival. And this is the drawing you may have seen at the Rio Gallery last year. I think that was 2 years ago. I won in the drawing on paper competition, which is called the Water Manuenta #2. And the reason, during the pandemic, I was quite quiet, but I did one drawing. This is one of the things I did recently. I did the drawing just to express my feelings on Black Lives Matter and all the racial equality issues. And one of drawing I did, I just wanted to share with it. You can find more on my website, but since there's so many up there, I will just wrap it up here.
Thank you so much, Jian. That was great, and a great introduction. And I had forgotten that I wanted to describe myself. So I'm also a middle-aged woman I pretty much follow Brooke's description with blonde hair, glasses. I'm wearing a kind of colorful gray sweater and a gray scarf with a background of kind of let's say a cafe background. So not many visuals, nothing to detract from the visuals of the artists. And so I thought we could move to Horacio, my next image, if you want to
All
share.
right, hello.
Hi.
Thank you.
Of course.
Let me go ahead and pull my screen up. All right, so my name is Oracio Rodriguez, and I am also middle-aged, Latino male, glasses, beard, and I'm in my kitchen presenting to you. So just a little bit about me and my work. So I'm an artist and educator originally from Houston, Texas. I got my Bachelor of Arts at the University of Redlands in California, my MFA from Montana State University. And I arrived in Utah after getting the Morales Fellowship at the University of Utah in 2016. And I was there for 3 years. I was a professor and also working on my art. Currently, I'm a Projecting All Voices Fellow out of Arizona State University. And I also teach ceramics at Alta High School. And I curate for Mestizo Institute of Culture and Arts here in Salt Lake City. And most of the work that I create is politically based ceramic works. And I posted a few pictures of some different work that I do here. And then my artist statement. So my work is about the many borders I've crossed in my life. I carry many of these with me in my memories and produce work about these physical and psychological borders. As a product of multiple cultures and identities, my art is used as a vehicle to explore the creation of my personal narrative. The process of creating my work happens over consecutive firings as I build up multiple layers on the surface of my clay work. I seek to transform and infuse new meaning into objects and symbols synonymous with my pre-Hispanic and Mestizo culture, as well as the seductive visual language of Western dominant culture. This creates a hybrid work which mimics my own layered identity. Although clay is my passion, I've let my ideas and the conceptual framework within which I work dictate the materials and processes that I engage with while creating my art. Projected imagery and photography coexist with slipcast ceramic pieces infused with original and appropriated imagery. This hybrid mix of media and techniques approximates the unique and often contradictory spirit of the border aesthetic I seek to create. So that's a little bit about me and my work. I'm very glad to be here in really good company. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Horacio. That was great as well. And Sterling, I'm going to call up your images and then maybe have you, let's see. Oh, give me a second. Okay. Try that again. Okay.
Okay. My name is Sterling Clydesdale. I am a 30-year-old male with curly brown hair, a beard, glasses, and I'm wearing all black as I always do, with my little black wide-brimmed hat. And I am based out of Reno, Nevada. I was originally born in Santa Barbara, California, and then put into foster care for 6 years of my life. And so my artwork speaks a lot to mental health and just the trials and tribulations that really anybody goes through. And so when I was in that space, I taught myself to draw. I'm self-taught in every way. And I work in pencil, acrylic, silkscreen, watercolor, photography, embedding video into photos, so and using technology so that you can scan it and actually see these moments. And my hope is to always capture faces and these incredible people that we lose all the time to mental health and stigma around disability and race and everything. This photo that you're seeing here is of Boy George. He's a great inspiration of mine, hence the hat. And I just really love that he speaks so loudly for the LGBTQ plus community, especially in the United Kingdom. And I try to incorporate as many icons and famous people, if you will, into my artwork, especially the people that we've lost. The next image that I sent to Elena is of Freddie Mercury. And so I just feel like there was so much stigma around like the AIDS pandemic, and now we're in another pandemic. So I felt like that was very appropriate, especially because we lost such a beautiful mind and a creative soul, basically because there was so much ignorance. And I want to bring attention to that and show people that even in art, even in the world, there is someone there that cares. There is a way to express that we care, and we can do something with art, and we can speak to these minorities, even though I don't think they're minorities. And yes, that is who I am. I'm based out of Reno, Nevada. I don't know if I said that already, but I'm honored and privileged to be here with all of these amazing artists today. And I just hope to capture every moment in time and every person that I can, capturing history every second of the way.
Thank you so much, Sterling. Great. So, Fidelis?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Greetings, aloha and Mario. I have here, I'm trying to screen share it. This is an image from my website, so hopefully it'll give you some context. My name is Fidelis David Kanoni Kiabuler. I stand about 6 feet tall, middle-sized build. I'm wearing a gray hoodie, jeans, and some tennis shoes. I'm a brown complexion. I'm of a mixed race. My father is from Wisconsin, German American, and my mother is from the Gilbert Islands, also known as Tungaru, which is the traditional name of the islands. The Gilbert Islands are located in Micronesia in the South Pacific along the equator, just north of Fiji. The bulk of my work deals with the issues of identity and my place kind of caught in between both worlds. I'll turn to my About page and then maybe show some images. But on this page, it says Fidelis Diehl is an artist influenced by his Euro-American Pacific Island history. The impact of his biracial upbringing and its divergence in the home guides his creative process. He currently resides in Utah and shows his work in regional, national, and international exhibitions. In my statement, I say, my work represents identity seen through the complexity of American culture and South Pacific traditions, calling attention to confrontations and conflicting realities, straddling the line between levity and earnest devotion. My work is a self-portrait seen through forms of expanded and contractive narratives. Image making is a ritual performed through playful conjuring, reassembling personal histories, inventing mythologies laden with fear, anxiety, dreams, revelations, magic, and mysticism. As some of my work shows, I try to cross the line between being taught and self-taught. I think Sterling has a better hold on being self-taught than I do. It's more of a longing for me to wish to return to something that's more innocent and childlike in my approach. And so my attempt is to try to pull that out as I paint and draw. And so a lot of the images here that you see, and I can maybe show them later, save time for others to speak, but it's to show the crossover between mythological representations of my Pacific Island heritage and the things I'm dealing with in the here and now. And a lot of that has to do with conflicts and the cross examination of the realities that I was facing in the home. And I'll give one example. While my mother was providing blessings and healing through magic and mysticism in her own rituals and cultures to heal a wounded leg, my father was saying prayers as a Catholic, hoping for the same results. And so those are the types of things I deal with in my conversations, are those types of narratives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fidelis. Very rich, we have a very rich visual array of works and types of media. And Greg, last but definitely not least.
Hamu nu Greg Diehl mina nia nu Kiuyui Takara. My name is Greg Diehl. I am a member of the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe, an artist and a father. And I am not stereotypically look native. My people have nice fat round faces, and so I carry that as a mildly brown middle-aged indigenous person. My hair is really long, but it's always pulled back, so I have a nice split down the middle as it's pulled tightly against my head. And I'm also about 6'4" and about 250 pounds. I'm a big dude. So I'm currently in my office, which is separate than my studio space, except that some of my practices require a computer. So this is a space where I'm surrounded by artwork and posters and things that have been given to me by fellow artists and other people that I love and respect. I'll pull up some images as well here. Again, my name is Greg Diehl. I grew up in Park City, Utah. I'm currently in Colorado. I'm located on the homelands of the Southern Ute with the Cheyenne and the Arapaho nearby. And you can find my website at gregdiehl.com. There's 2 G's at the end of my name, and my Instagram is at Greg Diehl. It's probably the most current set of stuff. I just want to show a couple of images so that you guys have a frame of reference. Right now I'm in the middle of a series of works called The Others, where I have reappropriated old images, old comic book images from the 40s and 50s that represent indigenous people, recontextualize them and change the dialogue to actually be filled with lyrics from punk rock songs from the 70s, 80s, and sometimes beyond. There's some interesting crossover in the effort of indigenous liberation and struggle and the disenfranchisement of young, mostly white, but sometimes others in places like the UK and the United States. I also, most of these works, I'll draw them, I'll digitize them, but I'll also paint them. So they're usually in multiple formats. I also work in murals. I did this last summer in Colorado Springs. It's called Take Back the Power. It's a 77-foot tall mural of my daughter, who is also a member of our tribal community. She has a red handprint on her face to denote missing and murdered Indigenous women, a serious and significant social issue that faces our communities. But likewise, she's also wearing a t-shirt of her favorite band. And It's meant to also be a representation of Native people being modern and being contemporary. And the other medium that I work in pretty significantly, pretty seriously, is performance art. So this is just an image of a piece that I did called Invisible Loss Movement in 2018. At the time, my 14-year-old daughter was 12, and I pulled her into it as well. She wants to be an artist, and so I've been pulling her into a lot of my work to give her as much exposure and opportunity as possible. In this outfit, I'm not wearing anything. I'm not wearing any colors. It is men's traditional Northern outfit, and Sage, my daughter, is wearing a jingle dress. Everything is black. I've stripped color out of these outfits that are traditionally very colorful to sort of match the movement of dance. And so it's not a ceremonial piece. It's not a traditional piece. It's a performance piece that is directly informed by my own indigeneity and the things that I see kind of within, that are around me within my culture. But I've taken things out of it to take away context and ideas, and actually stand as a metaphor in this piece. Even though I'm standing in the sunlight, it's still hard to make out exactly what I'm wearing. I have black ribbon work, black bead work, black leather work, and I still look like a shadow, as does Sage. And so the metaphor is that we exist, but we don't exist. We're here, but we're not here, that we are a shadow of the past, which is more reflective upon the non-native perspective of our existence than it is upon our own. But most of my work deals in identity. I have a lot of challenges towards Western perception of Indigenous people. So I touch on race and historical consideration and stereotype, and work in really like paintings and murals and performance art and filmmaking and spoken word and installation and conceptual work. And it just goes on and on. But my process is one of not just looking at those things as they may affect me or my children or my community, but also just looking at it internally as a contemporary artist and where I exist within that space and within that realm.
Thank you so much. Again, a very rich array of artistic media and different types of work. And it's clear that your identity plays a big role in shaping some of that work. I wanted to just touch on one thing, which is that one of the premises for this panel was to include and give artists from the Mountain West a platform for discussing their work. And I wanted, just for our audience members who may not be familiar, what the Mountain West means to you. I thought you could maybe elaborate that, and then how you would define it. How has the community or network of artists and or institutions in the Mountain West helped you grow as an artist? Or perhaps you may even identify some of the obstacles you've encountered as an artist from the region. So I'll kind of open that up and let anyone who wants to go answer. Maybe you can raise your hand or something and I'll call on you. But I thought maybe if someone has this sort of ready idea about that. Yeah, Greg, please.
I grew up in Park City, Utah. My parents made just enough money for us to be poor around white people in Park City. And so it was strange because I had all the privileges of living in a ski resort town with none of the privileges of money. And so, we didn't have a lot, but, we were still skiing. I had to remove myself from Utah to really feel like that I could kind of get my feet under me. Because, Utah is a very, very white place at the time. And so it was just a tough place to grow up. So I made my bones in Washington, D.C., where my wife is from and where we lived for almost 17 years. But the transition of going from the East Coast, particularly in a place where at the time there was a sports team named after a dictionary-defined racial slur, and the perspective of Indigenous people within that realm, and then coming out here to the West where the stereotype is still there, but it just has a completely different perspective in terms of the way that people engage it. I found to be really interesting and challenging to me and to my work. I also think I had an easier time because I did okay on the East Coast. And when I came here, I had enough to sort of establish myself enough to build relationships and things. But we've entered an age where conversations around race and ethnicity and identity and some of the issues that have traditionally been in place for people like me, we're starting to have conversations about those things in a way that they've never happened before. So it's been really interesting to see where I was like when I was in college and where those conversations were and how much of a struggle that was to being able to see where it's at now. And it's still a struggle, but it's a struggle with the door cracked open. So you got a little bit of space to kind of work your way in.
Yeah, thanks so much, Greg. I've also seen it as, you know, a professor and just the kind of on the other end studying the artistic production and have been, you know, happily following that crack opening. So I'm hoping that is a good sign and is going to lead to a bigger opening, if not a fully open door. But I wondered if anyone else had. Horacio?
Yes. So I'm a transplant to the Mountain West. I grew up in the Gulf Coast. I went to school out in California for undergrad, but I moved to Bozeman, Montana in 2016 to pursue my MFA. And I'm from Houston, which is a big city. Bozeman was a little too small. So after 3 years in grad school, I was ready for something different. And like I mentioned earlier, I got the fellowship here in Salt Lake City, and I really didn't know anything about Salt Lake City. I thought, you know, this is a great opportunity. I'm going to come to Utah. I'm going to come to Salt Lake City, do my 3 years, and then I'm out.
Yeah.
But what happened is I really fell in love, first of all, with the landscape and the people, and then the community has really pulled me in. And I've really found success here in Salt Lake City that I had not found in when I lived in Houston or when I lived in California. And there's been a lot of opportunity here for me as an artist, and I've seen other artists take advantage of the same opportunities. And it was a pleasant surprise. My career has taken off here, and I owe it to being here in the Mountain West and the people I've met. And it seems like the community is big enough that there's some diversity in the arts community here in Salt Lake, but it's also small enough that you start to get to know people and you get recommended for opportunities, and there's a real chance here to grow, because I feel like the art scene here is up and coming. And you know, for people who want to come here and make art and do things, you can make that happen. So I've been really happy here.
Thank you so much. Fidelis?
My first experience moving to Utah was for grad school at Brigham Young University. And shortly after graduating, my first inclination was to run, to get as far away as I could from the space. It was a combination of things, and I think partly one of my experiences growing up was moving every 2 years. But coming to the Mountain West region, there's nothing like it in terms of its landscape. The beauty of the landscape and being out in the backcountry is absolutely gorgeous. But there are times that the culture can be kind of toxic and at times stifling and suffocating for individuals who are not necessarily on the same wavelength as others here. And not to say that the community has been bad, I think it's been great. But every now and then there are times where it feels like it's hard for maybe me to grow as an artist, and it's hard for me to get the message out. I learned quickly that, yeah, there may be people who came and occupied the space as pioneers, but there's also a chance for me to act as a pioneer in another way, and that's to promote diversity and promote opportunities through my visual means. And so, excuse me, hold on a second. And so part of my reasons for staying now are much deeper and much more purposeful. I feel like the opportunities now to serve, and I teach at Brigham Young University, but I just had a student here who is from Guatemala, whose father is from, forgive me, I think it's Honduras, and her mother's from Guatemala. But immediately it was an opportunity to like help that student, and we talked through opportunities to get funding and to continue their education. the students' first inclination was just to graduate and move on. I said, but you have a voice and you have really an amazing talent. What else can we provide for you? What else can I help you with? And things like that keep me here. And so I feel grounded for the sake of helping others. But that's what the Mountain West region means to me. Another thing that I've noticed is sometimes it acts like an island. There's, corridors that allow pathways to here, but between those spaces, there's vast open spaces where there's little human interaction. And I feel in a lot of ways, it's like an island space where we're sort of in this location all together, and we kind of know artists across the valley, and we're familiar with each other, at least by name. And it's nice to know that the community of artists is tight and small, and yet it's interesting to see how at times it can feel separated from an outside art world. But thanks to the advancement of our technology, we can be able to access others. But yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's kind of identified some of the challenges, but also some of the strengths. Sounds like all of you have had that. Jian, please.
Hey, I just wanted to add that it's interesting to hear others' perspective. As a person who moved here because of my husband got a job here, and I moved here without much of preparation, and moved to New York about 14 years ago on my own to figure out to resume my art career. I had to search for many resources, and after fighting and working hard for a lot, and I got to have a couple organizations help, could access the resources. There are a lot of free classes or something you can apply and get it, like a Lower Manhattan Cultural Council or volunteer lawyers for the artists. Like I got to have an education, but I believe that was the region specific. So as I'm relocated Utah, as a person who believes like America is every state is kind of different country. So I tried to reset my mind, and I know I had a great fear being an Asian here because I had no understanding there's some Asian population, or I thought it's just all white people. And like I was shocked, even I went to Japanese restaurant, Asian, like white people serve the things. I was shocked, like, because that's something I would never see in New York. So I just start asking around as I'm doing the intimate diary kind of work, as I explained the Waterman character, because I was so fear of how I can adapt here, like where's my place, how I can, as I'm also breaking out the little bubble of the liberal bubble of New York, like everything was kind of very Democrat, and then come here, I have to measure every issues of conversation very careful way, like the woman issue or gun issue or and like all of thing on top of the very delicate issues of there's a mainstream and people, some are fitting in well and thrive, and there's a lot also try to fit in and not thriving and have a lot of feeling about. And I have in the similar mentality coming from Korea. Korea has a main thing, and they mainly request to fit everyone in, and there's also subculture around it because of, everyone can be a one form. And as I'm asking around, for me, like I applied the being a teacher professor here, I didn't get through because I start teaching at NYU. I really wanted to continue, but like realized I could continue. I have to find the day job, so I was doing the day job, but at the same time I was asking about the resource all around. And I like, is there any resources like New York provided? And the Finch Lane director at the time introduced me to an artist who was a transplant, and she introduced me to the crit group. And then I applied the many things, and I go to the Applied Urban Arts Gallery, and I did a gateway shop, and like just start having conversations, try to have a meeting people in Utah, like whether they're transplant or grow up here as an outsider or whomever available. I just try to have a conversation, find the like kind of connecting place. And that's how I starting to getting into the shows, getting into the word, and getting into the more connection. And I like, in a sense, I'm thriving, and I've worked hard for it. And like Horatio said, I'm very grateful that if I'm trying, I could move forward with, as I had a long practice on art myself as well, but it is still it is beautiful place. Like it is very nervously beautiful. When I see the great nature, I feel like, what am I doing here? I'm very nothing. Like what is human trying to do the artificial thing in this like beautiful nature, kind of shrinking feeling, but at the same time, I feel obligated to be part of the making up another, I don't want to say minority, but part of the diversity, want to be active, like, and want to be a voice of making things more interesting in the growing Salt Lake City as urbanizing very rapidly. I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Sterling, did you want to think about this kind of community of the Mountain West? Does that...
I know everyone's pretty much had it right on the nose. I mean, I've moved all over the United States, and I always find myself back in the vast desert spaces. And I think for me, really, it was the beauty of what we have. We have these beautiful colors, and we have sunsets and sunrises that you cannot find anywhere else. And then just being out in, what did Jian say? It was nervously beautiful, because it is really, it's almost overwhelming, the beauty that we have here. And I think I bounced around from Colorado, California, Nevada a lot, and I always find myself back in Nevada. And it really, for me, is the diversity of the people that we have here. And I live for diversity. I want to hear what everyone has to say. I don't care what you look like. I just think that everyone's perspectives are perfect and beautiful, and I want to hear them all and get to evolve myself as much as I can. And it's also assisting these people to evolve themselves and getting to just intermingle with these cultures, things that I didn't even know existed. My parents were originally from Australia. And so part of the reason why I was put into foster care was because they were kicked out of the country. And so that was one of my biggest fears, was that I too would be disowned by this country. And so I made my home where I felt most comfortable, and especially with Australia, you know, it's vast, it's open, it's desert. And I felt really connected to this Mountain West region. I know that I probably would love the East Coast, especially with all of the artwork and the culture and the community. But for some reason, I really felt to stay grounded and connected to my heritage in that way. So, I mean, that's what it means to me. It's, and Greg, it's actually really interesting, that picture that you shared of your mural on the side of the building. I was adopted when I was 6 years old in the Antlers Hotel that's right behind it. So I thought that was really cool. I'm like, we're all so connected. It's such a small world, even though it's vast.
Likewise, you're in the homelands of my people. You're like 30 miles from my reservation. So
Love it.
It's nice to find these connections, even in just, you know, the work of you five, and I can imagine on the scale of a whole region that just gets amplified.
Yeah, but yes, that's what the Mountain West means to me. It's my home. Yeah.
Thank you all for your honesty and identifying that. I also wanted to read one of the comments in the chat, because it's a nice comment from Liz. The idea of the Mountain West as a collection of islands is fascinating. This is Fidel's idea. I so resonate with that as a dance artist. Pathways in, but not as much transmission across. And I think that, I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that, but some of you mentioned the kind of ecological and beauty and the sort of privileged geography of this region. A lot of you mentioned diversity. I'm wondering, and you know, those are not, as Jian said, she thought she'd come here and there would not be that diversity. I'm just wondering, you know, how do we crack that door open more? What are your thoughts about what we could do as a region, or, you know, even in your own work, to improve the diversity, the demographic diversity? What do you think has been working for you to be able to crack that door a bit more, a bit wider?
I can go.
Please, Sterling.
So for me, it's really been about inclusivity, like including more and more people in my work and hearing what they have to say, and making them feel heard and included. I really feel like we don't listen anymore. And so when someone feels heard, they feel included, and they're more likely to contribute to this melting pot of diversity that we're trying to make. In my artwork specifically, I had a show not too long ago where, well, not too long ago, last year, because, you know, there's not been any shows, where I had people write down what they felt like they weren't able to say that they wanted someone to hear, and put it into a box. And I was able to transpose all of that into my artwork in the backgrounds of these portraits that I was doing. And it was really interesting, the breadth of responses that I got. And I really felt like after that show, it was, I was more and more connected to these people. And it actually inspired someone else to do a very similar show, but in their own way. But I felt like if I can inspire someone in that way and let people open up, man, our melting pot is going to just explode. And that's my hope. And I feel like that's how I can participate in that.
Yeah, thank you. Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've seen a pretty interesting change happen since last summer, since Black Lives Matter kind of broke out. There's been a number of different conversations, and I've even been hearing from organizations and groups I never really thought I'd hear from professionally. So the doors are clearly open. I think the struggle is being able to progress that conversation and being able to make sure that that it stays present, because we don't want this to become a trend, you know, where we're having a discussion and then like, all right, well, you know, I turned my profile picture black, you know, so I've done my part. Like none of these things do anything. We have to continue. But as a Native person, I often say that we're the most visible, invisible group of people in the country. Everybody thinks they know exactly what we are, but we are always left off of every major discussion that's being talked about with race. And so when you know the term Black Indigenous people of color came about, I mean, as the reasons that came about is disheartening, but seeing that sort of included is exciting. But and tying this back to your original question too about the Mountain West, Indigenous existence is within the context of the Mountain West is a problem. It's a significant problem. The last time I was in Utah, I did a show. It was actually the Transcontinental Railroad, like Golden Spike thing. And I had a little bit of time off, and I went up to Park City for the first time in, geez, like 20 years. And I went into some of the galleries on Main Street. Like that whole art scene is a completely different set of circumstances than like the discussion that we're having and the spaces that we get to share within discussions like this. And in those spaces, and you can see similar things in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and probably really any little small town in the West, there's this expectation for cowboys and Indians. Yeah. And the problem that ultimately exists with that is that those types of tropes have dictated what Native artists are doing. And it's hard to break out of it because so much of what Native artists are trying to create does apply in some way to a Western buyer's market. And if we're creating stories that are not familiar to a Western buyer's market, then it pigeonholes us into this place where if you want to make a living, you have to continue doing the same thing. I don't do that within my work. I've had little dabbles here and there, but there's been a progression to it. But I've found that consistency has been key, absolutely. When I was in DC and first started, I had gallery folks and just saying like, hey, we really like your work. Can you make it less Indian? And I didn't. I refused to compromise that. Well, a couple of years in, that's what people expect. So I think that consistency is key. We have to make our presence known unapologetically in everything that we do. Odd conversations about our existence or our work or the context of anything that's sort of within that realm, we get to dictate those spaces. The spaces we occupy are not inherently sacred. They are made sacred by our appearance and by our existence in them. And so I think we just have to keep pushing those things forward. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does, absolutely. And I mean, it makes me think of land acknowledgement and how, that has become much more prevalent as a practice. And it's something that I really appreciate. And I think it goes hand in hand with kind of declaring your presence and continually reinforcing and expanding what that presence could be.
And for allies, land acknowledgement, that's just the first step. That's
exactly.
The next step.
Absolutely.
No one's gonna like the answer, but I think it's land back. I think that's the next step.
Yeah, I love the logos of your drawings. Fidelis, you had...
Yeah, just looking at the chat, I saw a comment by Sarah Wolf regarding Greg's statement about visible and invisible in the Latin community. Mm-hmm. There's a section there where she says there are so many different cultures amassed, and I really think about that a lot. One of the things that I hope that most people are doing are trying to bring awareness to the nuances of their own cultural identity. When I talk to other people who are of Kiribati culture, we don't talk about the overarching culture. We don't talk about Tungnaruans in terms of, oh, you're from Kiribati, great, thumbs up. We talk about it in terms of your connection to your own family. So my family background is the Karango clan, and people who are from that location know specifically what I'm talking about. And when you get into the nuances of those things, there's value and there's serious importance in identifying those nuances. I love hearing from the panelists where they came from and what kind of struggles or trials that they dealt with getting to this point. And that provides a layer of value that I have to sift through and I have to deal with. It gives me context. And for me, for someone to come here, let's say from the Latin community and identify specifically where they're from, who their forebears were that got them to this point in time, to identify what struggles were along the way, what forces or people in power prevented their success in life. To me, that's meaningful. It provides an understanding for something that's deeper than just tagging people with a name and saying, okay, you're part of this group and you're part of that group. The one other thing I'll say about how we can better arrive at helping people to identify, where I'm at. For example, when I look at a map of Utah, I kind of get distressed when I see the borderline. I mean, I'd be interested in seeing things identified by different types of borders. What if it's just demarcation between village tribes that existed here before, and maybe that's where we place it. When I was watching an episode of C-SPAN, there was a bunch of soldiers talking about their experiences in Afghanistan. And one of the things that they said was, you couldn't move a rock because the rock identified the place where our grandfather sat for years watching his goats as he was herding his sheep. And if you moved it, they would identify something was moved, someone was there. And that really struck me. I wonder about the types of things that are removed from this place that noted significant locations, marks in time for people that existed before me. And I think the same way when I think about the islands, it's not a demarcation on a map. It's set by burial site, location of where your grandmother or grandfather was laid to rest. That represented an area of significance. Why don't we do that with the maps in Utah? Why don't we start there? Why don't we start with changing the way that we, the systemic problem of locating things or demarcating things based on maybe state boundaries or political boundaries, things like that would really change the way we see things. Maybe Greg has better insights to that than I do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And I recently was teaching a class on decolonization, and I was looking at a map that instead of, current or modern day nation states, it was all demarcated through indigenous territories and indigenous communities that had lived there. And that felt really relevant and important, and like something that should be circulated much more broadly. Thank you. Jian, you had a hand up. I don't know if you wanted to say something.
Yes, I other parts of, I think others covering well, but I just said just thing again. I'm sorry about that, the way I'm saying things, because anywho, I wanted to point out to contribute the talk on the how we can contribute to diversify. Yeah. And I want to, I don't think I mentioned, but I recently selected the new track station public art project, and I'm working on it. And as I'm thinking about I believe the public art is very important because that's free for everyone to face and everyone experience every day, and that it's visible and that is confirmed in a sense of representation of the certain kinds, like by having so. And as I'm checking the many other arts here that exist before that approved early on, there's a lack of diversity, and even if there's a diversity comes in, maybe lack of oversight or historical accurate screening was done, like kind of thing I could hear or find it. And in that perspective that I thought of what could be fixed, like how can we make it more interesting, I mean diverse. That comes back to the who's confirming those art projects, who's the up there, who's the board, who's the approving those art, who's the picking artists in the pool, what kind of pools, who's making those things. And often the money pool up there is mostly white, and it is sometimes their perspective, I understand it is hard to understand diverse perspective or modern art history or everything of that on top of the money and stuff they try to do. So I thought of solution, not that I'm an art administrator, I assume that that's the kind of thing more burden upon art administrator or who's in the art board, but I wonder maybe have. Pardon?
I said maybe they're watching, so it's important for them to hear.
Oh, yeah. So I think it's not actually what we can do that much. We can voice, but what they do is important. Right. But I wonder if they separate or first of all, I wish there's a more education on the who are in the board. And second, I wish there's a who's selecting art and filtering art are separate from the who has funding. So if that kind of power is separated, maybe they can more independently pick out the more diverse kind of art. And third, if there's a diverse types of art, not everyone is professional, not everyone is understanding all the issues down and deep. If there's some system can filter or oversight those kind of things, say there's an Asian art, if there's some Asian art studying student could look at it and from the university, like it could be very simple solution, but can be screened and we could be accurate if any source is coming out of this kind of system. By doing one by one visible and accurate and put a face in with the right identity, I think we can move forward with a more acknowledging, including one by one. I thought that could be good. And even further, I wanted to even say, I mean, quota thing would sound silly, but by having in a sense of checklist or check mark of the things like who represent here and here and here, like what kind of turn, in term as well as the medium, as well as the I mean, we cannot do all at once, but if there's a who's focusing on that, I mean, if there's a curator raising for that is more fostered here, it would be great. But if there's those kind of system in tiers, if we can do step by step and little by little educate and diversify, I think we can get there and growing city as a kind of playing a core role within like 4 or 5 hour city around.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think the power of one and, you know, smaller individual steps is clearly what we can walk away with. So I don't know if anyone else wanted to add to that, but otherwise we can move on to a different question. So, you know, it's clear that your identity has had a role in how you have thought about your artistic form. And a lot of you represent that form through different media and different themes and different ways, abstract and conceptually as well as figuratively. I'm just wondering if that relationship has between, you know, your work and its form and your identity has led to othering you in some instances or limiting what you could do. Yeah, Horacio, please.
So I was thinking actually about this a little bit earlier. I have, in a weird way, I have developed two bodies of work. I have my political work that I kind of see as the work that will go into more educational settings, museums. And then I have my work that sells on Main Street, Park City, Greg, that I haven't dumbed down, but it's definitely a different type of work with a different type of audience that is purchasing that work. And I've just felt at times just this conflict between, you know, being true to myself and making work that I value and I think is important, but also at the same time as I've gotten older, making work that is going to sell and make money and help support me and my family and not just live the model of being like the starving artist. So it's definitely been something that I've thought about, and I see it amplified here in Salt Lake, and I haven't come to a conclusion on what is the right way to go. So for now, I have two bodies of work, and that's just the schism that it is. But yeah, I wonder if any of the other artists have felt that at all.
It's interesting that you say that, because that's exactly how I feel about my artwork, because I definitely have the side where I have my pop icons, I've got my celebrities, and then on the other side, I have my artwork that speaks to the mental health, the LGBTQ plus community, the Black Lives Movement, or Black Lives Matter movement, excuse me. And they're very different audiences. And I have found myself actually like secretively putting messages in my artwork for the audience that wouldn't necessarily want to have that in their face. So I'm like, they can get the message, they just don't know that they have it. And maybe someday they'll discover it. So that's kind of how I've been merging the two, so to speak. But no, I've totally felt what you feel.
This is a good note for my students to look carefully.
Yes,
absolutely. That artists are very, they're not always, the references can be hidden.
Yes.
Anyone else?
I mean, to a certain degree, are you talking about like code switching? Like, I mean, because it kind of sounds like code switching, you know, like that. And I don't want to belittle your work in Park City, Mr. Rodriguez. I'm mostly talking
and I
about
didn't take it that way at all.
Yeah, I'm mostly talking about the white folks that can't tell their own stories and have to paint pictures of Indians in headdresses, you know. So like, but I think it's pretty normal to pull back. I mean, I know I pull back on my work, but there's always still enough of a punch there. Everything that I've done in that respect has always been a calculated decision. But there's definitely like a whole little punk aesthetic thing that happens with my own work where I'll just come in with a gut punch. I had a show with a good friend of mine, and he was he's Navajo. He's this amazing painter, and his stuff was very palatable and beautiful in the way he did it. And then I came in with, you know, like the punk stuff, you know, these statements that are really just not pulling back. And but then the juxtaposition of those two things together becomes an interesting conversation. But I find as I get older, it's harder for me it's getting harder for me to pull back. I just go in like a sledgehammer and then leave however I leave. So
Yeah, thanks. Fidelis?
My experience with galleries has always been with the notion that one day I might have to pass this on to students to show them how the process is done. I knew that also in the process of doing that, there might be some fortunate monetary experiences along with it where I might gain something from it. I had some representation in Park City myself, but I never felt comfortable with it. For a long time, it was stagnant, but the relationship was fine. Now recently I have some representation here in Salt Lake City, closer to a group of people that I feel more comfortable with. I feel like the audience's perspective and desire to be there is related more towards the things I want to talk about. So when I spoke to the gallery owner about what I was trying to do, they said, right on, we want you to talk about that. We want to see you express your interest in your cultural identity and the experiences that you're experiencing through that lens, and I felt more comfortable with it. But the bottom line is, when I bring it back to people who will be, in place taking over, eventually I won't be here, so I have to pass it on to someone else. My goal is to make sure that they understand why they're doing what they're doing. As long as they can have an awareness for their approach, they can be empowered by the decisions they make. I hate for anyone to feel like they have to give into a gallery space, or anyone who's in a position of power to do what they want just because there's some monetary gain to be made. That to me is problematic, extremely problematic. And then to be able to express what you want to do is really important. And there comes along with it the ability to be able to talk about that, and teaching future generations on how to talk about your work, to be concise, precise, and definitive with the things that you're trying to do is important. The honesty of being able to talk about what you care about will speak louder in the long run than and then trying to just do what the gallery expects, or what even the Arts Center might expect. I get a little bit frustrated sometimes when they expect me to bring in, someone wearing a grass skirt and coconut shells for, that to me is completely frustrating, because it shows that the problem's a lot deeper than I realized. And being able to say, no, my situation's a lot more nuanced than that. You don't understand. I'm caught between two cultures, and I'm trying to make sense of my experience in between these spaces. And if that isn't understood, hopefully that's what I'm trying to get across. But that's what I expect out of future generations, is be honest with your direction and where you're coming from. That voice is so much stronger.
And be open to what you have to say instead of sort of anticipating it and thinking, right? I mean, I think we need
Correct.
to cultivate that openness to kind of diverse experiences, which we see here on a very micro level, but I think is very, it's kind of underestimated. Okay, I think
I want to add the Horacio's question. I think, as a person who doesn't sell many artwork, and I make a living on something else to support continuing my art, I think if you can, I think artists who are highly educated, not that I'm not disrespecting anything Fidelis said or anything, but I understand if the artist allows to, and that is reasonable to make it is not a compromise, but it can be a two different level of the communication to the audience. I think not sometimes pushing art of what you like, forcing into the one level, or have a one entry level and keeping the high level that who could enter and have a more understanding to come to here. I think that's also reasonable. And if luckily the entry level get to sell, and I think is even better. Like if you are compromising greatly to, some artists who make another identity to do that. And I think there's no shame on artists who try to make a living. And that's also really highly skilled thing. Often artists who just only focus on what they want to express, and some other system is set so they don't have to worry about the money stream going on. I want to just say that I respect those people, and I think it's also important. I wish I have those things as well. And I think if someone could enter to understand and to go to the high level as they're going interested deeper, I think that that will be also very reasonable and great progress that also as an art lover could make, because not everyone could come in as the specialist of the art. Like they just want to love art and they start understanding someone, and then like when you buy the shopping more and then you get to expert shopper. I think his art is the same. Funny,
Yeah.
but yes.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to get to a few of the questions in the Q&A just before we sort of go. Oh yeah, sorry, Fidelis, yeah.
Sorry, I did sound heavy-handed, but no, I'm not trying to make any. I'm not asserting that people who are working in the gallery field to make a living should stop doing that. I'm speaking primarily from personal experience. How people choose to function is what they have to do, but for me personally, it's been a trial of trying to manage both sides. Jian, I totally get that, but I just want to make sure that I wasn't overstepping bounds in people's own progress or own personal direction they want to take.
Totally. I was adding on top of that because that is crucial, but I want to say that it's also the other way is acceptable and totally legit. And it's lucky if someone can make that same level together, but artists often struggle that they are selected for certain types of work who was more appealing and popular. And it's inevitable to fight with the curator who are running the show that I rather bring this work, and then they were like, we don't want to. Like, kind of struggle is constantly happening in a certain level.
I mean, and historically, that's just always been the case, and I imagine that will continue to inform relationships between institutions and artists, and it's that kind of pushing that makes it release a bit. So yes, I wanted to get to some of the questions in the Q&A, just to make sure that we get to them. So the first one was from Sarah Wolf. Horacio, did you have a show at Utectic Gallery in Portland a few years back? I lived there before moving to Salt Lake and absolutely loved the place.
No, I've never had a show in Oregon. I had a show at Granary Arts, and I did want to bring up Granary Arts because it's in Ephraim, Utah. It's in the middle of the state. It's a very rural community. And I brought my super political ceramics to Ephraim, Utah, and was expecting a lot of backlash, but ended up getting at the opening a lot of community support. A lot of my work deals with the border and border issues. And I was blown away at the support that I got there in Utah. So I think that there's a lot of great things happening in the state. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. And this sort of follows on your comments about your political work, Horacio, and this is from Liz Ivkovich. Dance artist and scholar Ananya Chatterjee articulates a difference between political and social justice work in performance. As in, political performance is about an issue, while social justice work creates change around that issue. Do you as artists see what Horacio describes as political work also about creating social change? Can you talk more about that? A kind of heavy question, but an important one, I think, for our discussion.
Was that directed?
Is it directed to all of us?
It's directed to all of you, yes.
Okay, yeah, because it absolutely is about making social change, like real life change.
Yeah. Greg?
This is really interesting, because within my own work, like I'll get called an activist, and I think what one person calls an activist, another might call, an adult with an opinion. And, it really just depends on who's got the microphone, like who has all eyes on them. And that's one of the difficult things about this, and because I think that there's another question about othering. They use the term othering. Much of my work, and I think a lot of other artists as well, are just articulating their experience. Like, I'm a contemporary artist. It gets really easy to become pigeonholed as a native artist, but really I'm a contemporary artist that happens to be native, and I'm just articulating my experience and how I am crossing this landscape, political, social, physical landscape, as an indigenous person to these lands. And so when I say, like, missing and murdered Indigenous women, just as an example that I already brought up. I am in a way trying to bring some information to that, but I'm also articulating a specific experience that that is being had, and maybe that doesn't apply to me directly, but I'll tell you, I have 2 girls and it absolutely applies to them. Statistically speaking, they're like 10 times more likely to be sexually assaulted or have violent interaction with a partner or anything based solely on their identity and who they are. And so is that activism? Maybe, but is it also articulating just an experience? Like, it's doing that as well. And one of the things that's happening in this country right now is that a person of color or a person from a different gender identity will say something and all eyes will be on them, when sometimes they're just saying something. Sometimes they're just trying to show that, like, yeah, I'm a human that has this experience. And that's not necessarily, you know, a statement that's being screamed from a pulpit, you know, at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Sometimes it's just being said. And so part of that othering ends up being taking that information and being like, well, they're an activist and they're doing this and they're doing that. We need to find a way to be able to normalize the discussion of these things and allow these things to exist without actually turning it into something that the artist may or may not be wanting to turn it into. Because really it just comes down to these experiences. We're all human beings, so you should be able to, on some level, understand what I'm saying and understand my own experiences. You should be able to draw that from something enough to empathize and have compassion for. But it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, I want to march on, you know, the National Mall or my local state. So
Yeah, thank you, Greg. That's
Yeah, it's very much about trying to touch somebody's, at least for me, it's about trying to touch somebody's soul, not start a war. Everything that I do. And I've lost many friends to suicide. So that's typically where I'm like, we've got to address this situation. I'm not trying to be political or an activist or anything. I just want to shine a light on the subject. And if I can do that, then I'm honored to do that.
I have 2 bodies of work. One that stays in my studio and it's unedited. It's a place where I can sort of scream from my car at the passerby who cut me off and say what I want to say. And it's unedited, it's pretty raw, and it's telling of like the deep, dark feelings I have inside about certain areas of society that I feel are problematic. And then I take it out into a public atmosphere, and I hopefully am able to edit down to words or ways that are concise and more precise to how I exactly feel. Not always, doesn't always work, but I feel there's an obligation to be responsible, a responsible citizen, and a responsible artist. I love the way Sterling talks about bringing like a peaceful conversation to something that is sensitive and at times difficult. And I tend to feel that there's more power in drawing people in than being repulsive and making a statement that's really heavy-handed. But I don't mind seeing someone who has the honesty to do that, and it's kind of built into their framework to do that. Like, we need those people too.
Mhm.
There are people that sound the alarm bells, and they are the ones who toss the grenade and let people know that we can't stand for certain things, and they're needed. But it comes with a layer of honesty. I feel like it's built into people to do that. I'm not saying that we can't be that way, that I can't be that way, but for some reason, I feel like embedded in every single one of us is a type of system for being, and it's because of generations that preceded us. And sometimes we're trying to invoke our ancestors in the process of doing that. And sometimes one of our ancestors is like the crazy uncle who wants to like say something pretty mean, and he needs to say it, and I feel like that voice needs to come out. And other times it's the stern aunt who has always had a voice in the conversation and a seat at the table, and I'm listening to those voices, and those voices are important. But to address it in terms of strictly political is not how I see it. I see it as an opportunity to have a conversation, a visual conversation, to share visual philosophy.
Yeah, well said, the idea of a visual philosophy. Jian, you had your hand up.
Yeah, adding on what Greg said, I think I grew up in Korea, that where most of, I mean, we have a majority of Korean culture that is, everyone is beautiful, whatnot, like certain way. But how we see the Western, like all other outside of influence, everyone in a sense grew up there perceiving their blonde white woman or blonde white male. So in a sense, what we are seeing, how we are perceived, like I make art to want to be treated, just want to have a same discourse or conversation as a white person, I guess. Like in a sense, I just want to talk about my art, how I express like my otherness, not only as a Korean in Korean, but also Korean who moved to America and become a part of the American. So that level is always continuing, and there's other things. Soon I moved to America, I have to represent or start be a spokesperson as whenever I go to one of the like front line. And I like, sometimes I just want to talk about art as if I'm just a non-Asian person, or not woman, or not maybe early, like mid 30s or mid 20s white male face. If I have that, I wonder my art can be discussed differently. And from the perspective, I want to recommend everyone to watch the show in Hulu, Woke. And that is the show about the Black comic artist who always draw like a white like comedy, like a Calvin and Hobbes. And one day he was always believed and treated as he's a white, like same as a white. And one day he woke up, realized that he's not, like was perceived that way, and start going different paths, see the world different way. I'm still not like struggling between that, what I'm seeing, what I'm being seen. But I agree on Greg, and sometimes that I inevitably have to do that. Not that I not like depreciating any of that. I appreciate that I can be a spokesperson sometimes, and I'm happy to be contributing. Yeah. But at the same time, I always to be happy to be treated as another regular artist.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like what you said, Greg, right? I'm a contemporary artist. And I mean, as a provocation, I assigned this article, and I don't have all the citation information on me, but it's by a Bangladeshi artist who's an indigenous Bangladeshi artist, and who says that there's no such thing as an indigenous artist or indigenous art. I don't create that. I create work, and that participates in what we construct as the art world. You know, on the one hand, there are these feelings that you have that go into your art, but isn't that what all art is about, right? It's not specific to any identity. It's always about some sort of expression of you and who you are, whatever that expression, whatever form that expression takes.
Absolutely.
Yes, please, Greg.
I had a show at the Smithsonian in 2016. It was a large group show, and I was being interviewed, and the woman who was interviewing me, she said, so you're a Native American artist? And I immediately knew what she was saying and what she was doing.
Yeah.
And she clarified, she's like you show your work in Santa Fe, New Mexico, like you're a Native American artist. And I said, you know, I have to ask you this. She was a white woman from Brooklyn. And I said, I have to ask you this. When you talk to a white man, do you ask him if he is a Euro-American artist? And of course the answer is no. And so like these are things, you know, going to that place of diversity that we're talking about, sort of expanding our understanding. We just need to eliminate some words and some things, and we need to expand our understanding and our words. Like the pronoun game that we're having right now, this is a fairly new discussion, at least on a popular scale. We are changing and we are adding language to what's happening, which I think really points to how limited English is. In my language, there is no pronouns for no possessive pronouns for men or women. They're the same. And so, you know, we oftentimes look at, you know, being English speaking, being American, we're so progressive, but we're not. It's a really difficult language to explain anything. As it stands, we're currently discussing decolonization, but we have to do it in English. How weird is that? Like, that just, it defeats the entire purpose. But yeah, I think, you know, we just need to move to this place where we just start eliminating our preconceived notion of things. Either that, or we just need to apply it to everybody equally.
Thank you. Well, I want to get to our, I think we're kind of running out of time, but I want to get to the last question in the Q&A. This is an anonymous question. How can allies with privileged identities learn more about and or patronize artwork from minority artists without othering or exoticizing it? I mean, I think to a certain degree, you guys have been addressing that, but I don't know if anyone wants to kind of more specifically target that.
Can you give
I
us
have
the question again? Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
No,
how
good,
can
good.
allies with privileged identities learn more about and or patronize artwork from minority artists without othering or exoticizing it? And I think Fidelis, you had something you wanted to comment.
Well, I have to be careful not to do that myself to my own work.
Sure.
When I look at aspects of my own culture, I have to remember where I stand and who I am in context with those things. That's showing the utmost respect for something that I don't clearly have a grasp on. When people ask me if I'm from the Gilbert Islands, I say, no, I'm not. I didn't grow up there. I spent several years in the South Pacific, but I'm not assimilated to the cultural context of being Gilbertese and living in that space and understanding all the cultural norms. And when I do that, it empowers me and it allows me to be more prepared to make artwork. And before I even make artwork, it's about asking permission. Many of the things that I make are based on dreams or conversations or stories between me and my mother, and experiences in the here and now as I experience them, and trying to contextualize all those things. And before I can make work, I have to ask that question, like, what is it? Is it okay? Am I in the right place to be making the works that I'm making? To ask the next question about whether or not if there's fear or anything in relationship to me being exoticized. Yeah, I guess there is, but I guess I don't know enough about the other person to say whether or not I should be upset. All I know is that it's an opportunity for me now to express a vantage point or a viewpoint that's not necessarily open to the entire world. So yeah, there might be some misgivings towards it, but I think it provides a platform when they're asked the question on my work. I can now be in a place to be a representative or talk about it. So there's a little give and take in there.
Thank you. I mean, I think all artists are interested in dialogue and conversation. So if you open those channels, then you may come from a place of preconception or stereotype, but if the work is making you question that, then that's already a step in the right direction. That's where we want to be. And that's, you know, kind of where I start the conversation with my students. I want it to be an opportunity to know more and to recognize that a lot of times we know very little, right? And that our perspective, defined as it is quite limited. So I think the way not to exoticize something is just to ask and have and to dialogue and converse about it.
Absolutely.
People ask me, where you're from? And
Yeah.
I say, I was born in South Korea. I know many people get offended, like pronouncing name wrong, or if I were born in America, I look like this, I may get offended. But I say it truthfully, and I ask them back, where are you from? How did you grow up? What's your family like? And I want to have a conversation. Like, I don't think all American is same, as much as I am not a typical Korean as well. And having a deep conversation with everyone, not everyone, there's not a single person, same person, like, even though maybe, you know, maybe like look same, white person, never the same when we have a conversation, all different interesting family background and history. They may have a different types of pet or different types of family history, education, all background are all different. And I read them like I opened a new kind of book. And in a sense, if they started having a conversation with me, they're feeling exotic about me, I think it can return same. And if the mutual agreement is made, if they're just curious about that, this exotic person, if the conversation goes that way, we can just walk away and drive away. But if not, that person is engaging, being trustful as well, I think we can open up and have a understanding about like more wider knowledge on other kind. I think in that sense, I'm very I want to open up and forgiving about it. And I just appreciate any kind of interest to lead to the more conversation that it could be deeper.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. I think I'm respecting the time, although I have lots more questions I want to ask, so maybe we need a part two. But maybe turn this over to you, Brooke. And
Well, thank you. Yes, it's so great that you guys ended up on the last question and referencing dialogue and conversations, because that's what we were doing today. And it, you know, to be able to listen to the conversation you all had was really insightful for me. And I wrote down so many things and echo so many of the affirmations that came through from our viewers. Again, for those of you watching, if you want to continue engaging with this content, you can. The previous conversations and artists that we've held up and elevated in this series are found on our website, utahpresents.org, under the Artists Elevated page. And you can also find all of our other virtual offerings there. We're a multidisciplinary presenter, so there's all sorts of things. And I really do just want to close this afternoon with gratitude to everyone here today, the artists, moderator, to all of you listeners, to our partners, and to all of you who asked questions and chose to spend time with us today. So thank you, and I hope everyone has a lovely afternoon here in the Mountain West or wherever you are.
thank you so much for coming and being with us this afternoon. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm honored to be a part of this.